you. I don't. Sweet. All right. So we're having the bi-weekly steering committee meeting for Kubernetes. Today is Wednesday, January 31st, and this is being publicly recorded and will be posted to YouTube later on. I am acting as person today. So I'm just running through the agenda, which I'll paste in chat again if y'all don't have quick access to it. First up, we got wind of an issue about how master is kind of a sensitive and exclusive word, and there was a request to change the word master to something else. Master in the context of the Kubernetes master.
Didn't we have this conversation already and tell that person to go pound sand? No, I mean, it like really, is this for real?
It's. I don't know. I mean, it is I think a different person than before. We did change minion.
At least we don't have a slave. That's a good thing.
But yeah, so I think the issue is raised about gender as well as, sounding like the overlord or something like that.
So this is common in literature, though. So I mean, if you are referencing any distributed system,
can I get a sourdough petard to go?
Yeah.
Clayton mute.
Yeah, if you're referencing any literature for like the last 20 years, it'll be master worker paradigm, right?
So I hear all y'all, but the truth of the matter is that this is an evolving space, and I think it's worthwhile for us to be sensitive here. I also think that master is not the most accurate term here, right? It implies that there's like a single thing that's essentially the master. We really have a distributed control plane.
I think that's the real point.
Clayton, you need to mute, man.
Joe, do you have the power to mute him?
Yes, I do.
Wait, it says I'm muted. Is it playing?
No, I just muted you. You just got muted.
Yeah, we heard your sandwich order.
This is bizarre.
So my input to this is just that I think if it's a decision we feel like we need to revisit, it would be helpful to have just at least an estimate of the cost of this change, because it's not just changing documents, right? I'm pretty sure the word master is referred to throughout the code. It might, heaven forbid, even be referenced in an API or two, which might need to require like a long-ranging deprecation policy. So it's not a change to be taken lightly.
I think for the most part, there is no proper noun master. It's just sort of a concept space thing. I hope. I haven't found any places. I can't dredge any up.
Almost certainly QADM has some stuff related to this.
Okay, yes.
This came up in the label, the well-known labels discussion. Yeah. So people have been using like role master.
I think that's the only thing I can think of where it shows up in code is in the labels. So here's the thing: is I think this is not necessarily something that the steering committee should actually be pontificating on. I just wanted to give folks a heads up on this.
Well, it depends. Like, okay, if it's not the steering committee's job, which SIG is responsible for making the decision?
I would say this is a SIG architecture call. I mean, because this is about how we call the architecture, how we describe it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, sounds good.
I just wanted folks here to have a heads up, because this is the type of thing that could very easily be a tar pit in a whole bunch of dimensions.
Yeah, I would say at least documenting why it is the way it is. Like, Tim, if you can dig up some example literature reference or something like that, then that would at least provide insight on our intent in terms about what it means in the meantime.
But to your point about evolving space, it's going to continue to come up both inside and outside the community.
Yep.
And my personal take on it is that even though we're not using the term slave, which obviously we kind of dodged that bullet, in a lot of folks it sort of brings up those connotations. And so I don't think it's totally invalid to actually sort of have concerns here.
It's not, but like I said, I think we should estimate the scope of the change. So that's going to be a SIG architecture issue. We have a lot on the agenda, so I'm going to move us forward.
Sounds good.
I look forward to hearing.
Sorry, just to very briefly go back there. So our two main concerns are the amount of work required to make any change, and the other concern is, I guess, what other term can we come up with that will not invoke
That's not difficult. I mean,
offense from somebody else.
Control plane sounded good to me.
Yeah, there's look at the issue, Quinton.
No, I have just done exactly that.
Okay.
It's not clear to me that the alternative proposals are entirely inoffensive either. Leader, for example, could
Control plane?
other people.
how is leader offensive?
Anyway, we're moving on.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about that in SIG architecture tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. So next, we're going to go through and review progress on the current sprint and outstanding efforts. Okay, so just looking at the sprint here, updating project values, Sarah.
Yes. I tidied them up some more this morning. It looks like 3 of them are pretty concise and relatively uncontested. I tried to tighten up distribution is better than centralization and community over product or company a little bit more to make sure that we were getting the intent and making it a lot less wordy because, wow, Brendan's wordy. I mean, he's got some good content, but not all of it should be in our values. So we can actually write blog posts about any one of these values at some point later to explain more, but values should be really tight, really strategic, really high level. So I've got 2 revisions that are still open on distribution is better than centralization and community over product or company. The other 3, if you guys are good with them, then we can just leave them as they are.
Okay. Can we maybe agree to review this by a certain date and then you can finalize it?
We can also, I can read them right now if we want to do it super quick because they're not long. That's the whole idea.
Sure, do it.
Distribution is better than centralization. The scale of the Kubernetes project is only viable through high trust and high visibility distribution of work, which includes delegation of authority, decision-making, technical design, code ownership, and documentation. Distributed asynchronous ownership, collaboration, communication, and decision-making are the cornerstones of our worldwide community.
Sounds good.
Hey, I got a thumbs up on one of them. Or 1 thumbs up. I get 2.
It sounds good. I looked at the doc just a little bit a while ago, and there's a few places where I thought we could do really minor wordsmithing just to sharpen it, but I wanted to not suggest those until we had agreed that we were
pretty close. Yeah, that's why I left those is because I was cutting out 2/3 of the words. Community over product or company. We are here as a community first. Our allegiance is to the intentional stewardship of this project for the benefit of all its members and Kubernetes users everywhere. We support working together publicly with the common goal of a vibrant, interoperable ecosystem, providing an excellent experience for our users. Individuals gain status through work, companies gain status through their commitments to support the community and fund the resources necessary for the project to operate.
Yeah, I think that's a big improvement over the previous versions. I mean, one of my biggest concerns about this was actually conveying that we have a shared mission.
Yep.
And that we're committed to that mission and responsible stewards of that mission. And I think this captures that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so can you rewind just on the distribution is better than centralization. On the previous version, there was a theme around geographic distribution and sort of being sensitive to that. Go ahead.
That's all wrapped into worldwide community.
Okay, just by putting worldwide, yeah, sure. Conciseness is good.
And asynchronous.
Yeah, asynchronous and worldwide community is where I tried to pull that in.
Very cool.
Because these are really supposed to be crisp. And to your point about community too much versus company, I'm saying community first, stewardship of the project. We're not stewarding the community.
Yes.
I changed that in a couple of places.
Yeah, I think that's a big improvement.
Okay.
We are here for a purpose. It's not a social club.
Right. Yep. Okay, then I am going to accept these changes and we can play last round of tiny wordsmithing.
Okay.
Resolve. All right. So go do tiny wordsmithing. Go check my semicolons, my whatevers, and because I like that these are now down to 2, maybe 3 sentences. They really should be short.
Okay. I'm going by the order in the sprint, not the order in the doc. So I'll get to what's left in the doc afterwards. Next up is intrasig governance. So that's Phil.
Yeah, so there's a proposal out in PR. I think a number of people looked at it. Looks like there's a couple comments from Brian recently. I didn't finish reading it. Sorry.
I didn't finish.
So maybe come back to that next meeting. I literally have it open now. I think my big high-level feedback is from the amount I've got through so far, it doesn't seem to be reconciled with the sub-projects and owners stuff that Aaron and I were doing. So I'll sort of look at it with an eye with respect to that, because a big part of that effort was to close the gap between the code owners organization and the people organization. Okay. And so I think there are some differences that were introduced into the SIG proposal in terms of the people organization, and some of the terminology is used differently, like sub-project versus project have different meanings, which might be confusing. Okay. And technical lead versus owner. So, you know, I think I'm not wedded to the terminology except to the degree that Aaron has pushed a bunch of PRs through, but I'm happy to make, well, for naming, I'm happy to just take whatever's in the sub-projects.
So, I mean, so the one discussion that you may want to dig into there, Brian, is in this proposal, it's using Google Groups as the sort of system of record of who's a member of the SIG at different levels. And that's obviously sort of a different system of record from owners files. And there's pluses and minuses across these things, and it's difficult to build automated systems to reconcile these because there is no API for Google Groups outside of G Suite. And, you know, so like there's, you know, short of making some pretty drastic changes, there's some really hard decisions to be made there in terms of what we want to be the system of record around membership.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that wasn't clear to me, and the amount that I went through so far is how membership was maintained. Like members were referred to in many places, but I haven't come across the, you know, what is a member part of it yet.
Yeah, if you can't find those, just dig into the comments, because I think, you know, Phil and I had a back and forth there. I'm convinced there's no silver bullet here, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I'll definitely point out that I haven't gone through and reviewed this in depth, so maybe my question is answered there. But nobody who was working on this was present at the community meeting when I announced a SIG leadership change. And so people were wondering, like, what's going on with how people change SIG leads? And so I talked about this briefly. I just mentioned that there was a survey out and that what was coming was going to be more of a choose your own SIG adventure type of like best practices. Did I mischaracterize this document, or is that the intent of this? That like not that once this is released, like every SIG doesn't need to go immediately reconcile how they're running with this document. This is more like a suggestion for how you could run your SIG if you so choose.
Yeah, at the top it goes into that and explains it, but there's two charters in here. One's the TLODR version, which is like 20 lines and just says, here's the rough structure. And there's a very detailed one that outlines processes for replacing SIG leads and what happens if various things come up that come up.
Right, but I guess like my perspective of this from a SIG lead is like, what do I have to do with this? Do I have to do anything?
I should clarify that. There's a couple pieces that you will need to do things as a SIG lead. I think specifically the having an explicit plan for keeping test passing.
Okay. Like the way I presented it was like, it's going to be a checklist of the what, not necessarily the how. So SIGs who get ahead on like documenting what their leads are expected to do and what the process is for changing leads and what they think they own in terms of code and processes for the project, like they'll be ahead of the game and they can check those check boxes off. So I would hope that eventually when this is presented, like this seems like, I don't understand as this is an actionable thing if this is being given to SIGs as you must do, right? So
Aaron, I think there might be a companion, and hopefully I'm not going to freak Phil out. I think there might be a companion document here in terms of this is what the project expects from SIGs, and we should outline that. And then it's up to SIGs to be able to actually fulfill that. This document is a suggestion or sort of a starting point that SIGs can then go ahead and take and build upon and modify. I don't think we've called out separate from this in terms of what are the responsibilities of SIGs in terms of how they present and interact with the rest of the project.
Yeah, we do have a pre-existing doc that covers a little bit of expectations of SIGs. It would be good to expand to include some of these other things, like we expect there to be a process for replacing leads or something like that. That's kind of the approach that CNCF has taken as well, where there are the graduation criteria that specify we expect projects to meet these criteria, like you must have the code of conduct, you must have a governance model, things like that. And that's decoupled from the advice that projects are given about how to fulfill those requirements.
Great. So I'm just
I want to interject here because I haven't had a chance to come and I've had my hand up for a while.
Sorry, I thought you were holding your head. My bad, Tim.
No, I had my hand up this way. There are parts of that document that call out a set of processes and responsibilities that I don't know if it's even possible for a volunteer army to fulfill. And I called that out in part of the review, and I think maybe we can do an expanded review next time, because it's very difficult to expect some parts of a volunteer army to have on-call rotations and that type of engagement when some of these folks may have other responsibilities. So there's aspects of responsibilities that I think need to be refined, separate from the roles. And this document kind of conflates and hits both, right? And I realize that certain roles should have certain responsibilities, but we need to make sure that it's clearly defined and it's accomplishable by all parties, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be simpler or helpful if, as Joe suggested, just take out the goals that the SIG that are the SIG's responsible for, and then say you have to do these things. And then if you want to know how, here's a document that gives an example for processes.
Yeah, like just as an example, if we want issues triaged for whatever that means, with some regularity, or we want certain things to be done before the release, or we want certain kind of communications to happen to the broader group. I mean, some of these things we'll have conventional processes for, but what we started with is just statements about how and where SIGs need to be engaged with the rest of the community and the rest of the process. So I think that's a helpful way to think about it. Like, what do we actually need from SIGs, or what do we want from SIGs? And helps form the goals, make the goals clear for what we're trying to achieve as well.
Joe made the nerdy analogy I was going to make. It's an interface and a reference implementation.
Yeah, that's great. Great analogy.
Is any of this ready to present to the community for feedback? I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing suggested is that we come up with sort of that generic, here's the checklist of what we expect. It sounds like we need that before we socialize to a wider audience. Is that correct?
I'd agree with that, Aaron.
Yeah,
I think if we push this too hard, then every SIG's going to think that this is the one true way they need to model, and I think that would maybe be more pain than benefit if we don't get the other one first.
Okay, cool. So I can start that. Does anyone else have a strong vision or opinion that would like to join with that, or would you like me to just basically take this document and then create an interface from it?
I think that's a great start, and I'm happy to help. And first of all, I just want to say you've put a ton of work into this, man, and I really appreciate it. I think this is a huge step forward. I think we need to keep at it, but like this is definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, part of me talking about this at the community was to like inform people that we've been doing great work here, and there was general like nodding of heads that approach of making a checklist that you can just check off, specifying the what, not the how, was was cool. So like, if you have something of substance you want to talk about tomorrow, you can do that. Otherwise, it sounds like maybe we should think about having a broader discussion next week.
I do want to say, I think that we might have something in the sort of interface that is something along the lines of have a fair documented process for picking SIG leads, right? Would be one of those things. And we probably, and I think this is a question that we need to struggle with is what level of oversight do we want the steering committee to have? Do we want to ratify charters and charters in those processes to ensure that they continue to be fair, or just wait for people to raise exceptions?
That's a really good question. I don't know if there's room in the community meeting tomorrow, maybe asking about charter validation would be a good idea, because I'm assuming the way to enforce this going forward will be to ask that by some certain deadline, all SIGs have charters, and those charters must spell out these things.
But yeah, I guess I look at this kind of with Tim's point of like not all SIGs are equally sized, and then if not all SIGs can meet the responsibilities that we want them to meet back to the project, then like some of those discussions will be difficult to say maybe we should collapse some SIGs together, or people will look at that and then like I don't know, I just think we should start there, to be honest.
Which is true.
What is the SLO we want a SIG to provide back to the project?
Yeah, but like at a bare minimum, in terms of SIGs describing what they think they cover and having a documented process for new SIG leads and stuff, it seems like there should be some level of standardization in place that should be fair to expect of any SIG.
So your question about exceptions versus oversight, I'd say that if we really are, wow, you're wielding an axe. I'd say that if we really are trying to delegate and distribute this authority, then this is an exception process, not an oversight process.
Yeah, I agree.
It's reasonable. This is my thinking axe, by the way. I hold this when I'm thinking.
Thinking axe.
Wow. I'm going to have to get one of those. Okay. So I feel like we've got enough feedback for you, Phil. Are you ready for us to move forward to the next?
I got enough feedback to produce more stuff to get more feedback on later.
Okay. You just joined by phone. Who is that? 1919.
This is Clayton. Sorry.
I was going to say 9 is North Carolina.
All right, there you go.
So did we skip over the repo issue?
No, we're getting there. I'm going by the order that's listed in our sprint doc. Okay, so checking governance docs into community repo. I think we considered that closed as of last meeting. Any disagreement? Okay. Next up, resolving the disconnect between code organization and owners. So I rolled out an initial implementation and a pull request to the community repo, as well as an issue describing roughly what we think sub-projects are and why we want them to be that way. I got a smattering of feedback from some people in the community. I then asked the steering committee for more concrete feedback. So the question is this good enough to roll out now, and how do we roll it out? We could merge the PR as is and then iterate on it. But if I were a SIG lead, having my SIGs README change out from underneath of me would seem a little weird, especially for some SIGs whose README becomes like a lot less readable or concise, with like API machinery has a ton of stuff listed in their thing. Also, it might come across as being voluntold that suddenly you own all these sub-projects when maybe you didn't necessarily have any input into this. So perhaps a less draconian approach would be to show this pull request off loudly and proudly to the community via a thread to Kubernetes dev and talking about it at the community meeting tomorrow, including talking about roughly what sub-projects are and why we're going through this. And then sort of saying, get your input in by such and such date. I mean, we could also say that this is an initial implementation and those sub-projects lists are not final. It's just something for us to iterate on. And we're going to work on giving you a deadline later by which this is considered authoritative.
Well, I think I'm in favor of doing both of those things, like saying that this is not final, but also explaining what we're doing and asking for input. We could send email to the SIG leads if that hasn't already been done and ask them to communicate to the relevant people and their SIG to take a look.
Okay.
I don't think there's really any great GitHub teams, and GitHub notifications don't work very well anyway, especially with BetaBot pinging everything. Yeah, between the SIG leads, Kubernetes dev, and the community meeting, I think that's a reasonable set of places that should reach most people. It won't reach everybody, but that, it's impossible to reach everybody.
Okay.
I think it's worthwhile for us to drive home the point again and again every time we talk about this, about the why, the idea of aligning code and organization and trying to actually make sure that we have clear lines of ownership there. I just think we got to beat that thing to death to make sure people understand why.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, and have you sent any PRs, Aaron, to actually add the owners clauses to any owners files?
No, I haven't. I wanted to talk to you about the scope of that implementation to see, like, if there were, how deep in the tree do you have to be for there to be an owner's file, or like which owner's files shouldn't have that field, things of that nature.
I see. Okay, yeah, I can talk more about that. Okay. The main reason I was asking is it's easier to change what we call that role before we start rolling it out in automation.
Yes, this is why I specifically have made sure I just am focusing on just this strawman, like human readable and also machine consumable implementation before I start sharding it over all the repositories. So what I could use your help with, Brian, or somebody's help with, is getting a list of the sub-projects out of Brian's head.
Yeah. So sorry, I've been somewhat DOSed getting back from vacation, inundated with a bunch of things, but I'm starting to dig my way out. So I'll try to make a pattern. Where's the best place to put that input on 1674?
Yeah, just add it there. Or if you want to work offline and put together like a Google Doc or something that we can then PR into that after we've presented to the community, whatever. Just like I'm taking a best guess at single repo things. What I lack is the context for multi-repo or multi-package or multi-directory sub-projects.
Okay.
That's where I'd like, because those are the ones that I think would be especially more motivating to the community. Like, the one person to talk to about workloads APIs, right? And all of the different directories that one person or that group of technical leads or whatever has authority over. Okay, so my hope is I will present about this at the community meeting tomorrow. I'll get an email out to the leads and dev later today, and lazy consensus to get that pull request merged by next week. And then this will spill over into next month as far as what our sprint is. And I plan on starting to write some automation to consume this to make sure, are those owners files even present? Start talking about the adding the sub-project and SIG fields and owner fields and stuff to owners files after I talk with Brian offline. The other thing I could use Brian's help with, or I can take a pass at, but I need maybe Brian to look at, is merging the maintainer and owner role in the community membership ladder. Because I'm not sure whether it's a merging up or a merging down as far as some of the requirements and duties go.
Okay, so how do you want me to do that? Just like craft a PR?
Yeah, craft a PR. That'd be great.
Okay. At the same time, should I also nuke the collaborators?
Somebody else has a pull request out to nuke the collaborators right now, actually.
Okay. Another thing I think we should consider doing is nuking the members. But that doesn't have to be tied to this. Like, I want to separate the ladder from the GitHub nonsense.
Fair. Okay, yeah, let's separate that from this, though.
Yeah.
Okay. That brings us back to the topics on the agenda. So, Brendan, this is Tim's item. Brendan, any update on your proposal about the different classes of projects and where we are with socializing this to the community and rolling it out?
I went through and I addressed all comments unless things have been added since then. I wanted to go through one more time, and given the fact that the comments were addressed, see if there's any other concerns, or if we can socialize at Kubernetes community or Kubernetes dev, because the next step I was going to take was going to be to send it to Kubernetes dev.
It didn't actually look to me like comments had been addressed. Maybe they were rejected, but there were some concerns about using the GA terminology versus rolling up into a Kubernetes release. And also just
right, there was that one that just came in. Sorry, that one came through from Tim. I missed that one.
That one came in like weeks ago.
I went through like a week ago.
Yeah, so this is Derek. I made a number of comments explicitly with that concern. Like for SIG-sponsored projects, I see little motivation for folks to want to go work on that project. For example, that they can't create a V1 image and publish it to a container registry somewhere. Like, and to me, like one of the things that we expected out of incubators was that they could frequently demonstrate releases and tag them, and like people could start to utilize them. I feel like the SIG-sponsored repo work should also allow people to frequently tag their repo as a version release and be able to push images for their efforts somewhere. And whether or not they are officially blessed up into a core Kubernetes release is like a disjoint issue to me. But I don't know why. I don't know why the GA terminology is getting coupled with, like, from an end user, like is there an image that's built with this release?
All right, so I see comments from Philip and Derek on January 26th. I think those are the ones that I didn't actually catch. Everything else should have been addressed. To speak to what Derek is talking about, and I guess what Phil also was talking about, I don't super care, and I guess maybe the meta question for the steering committee is, do we believe that we want to have a Kubernetes project level notion of what GA means? And if we do, then I believe that we need this mechanism to enforce consistency for what GA means. If we don't, then it doesn't matter. But I kind of feel like we should have a consistent notion of what GA means, and that means deprecation policy and everything else like that.
We do for APIs and for certain other things like flags, but not for other kinds of functionality.
Correct. I mean, and I guess that's the question, right? Like, do we want to push that forward as something that we believe in for SIG level projects in general, or do we not think that that's important? And if we don't think it's important, I don't care, and we can strike it from the doc.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about is I commented on January 10th, and you responded that it was discussed when I was out, and the decision was anything in a Kubernetes release should be in core. So I guess I should have responded to that comment because I didn't understand how the releaseness didn't being in core didn't seem like it got folded back into the criteria. It's not in any bulleted list.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't really. Yeah, I guess it's not really there. I guess that. I mean, I guess it was what I thought it was expected to be present in every or nearly every Kubernetes cluster.
Isn't that an issue? Sorry, go ahead. Isn't that an issue for like conformance separate from like an add-on? I guess.
Yeah. So I guess my higher level feedback on this whole thing was I guess two things. One is in November, we had agreed as an interim measure to unblock SIGs by allowing them to go to SIG architecture and just say, hey, can I have a repo? And I got another request for a few repos today that I said we can discuss tomorrow. And the other is, I think it's better to convey our goal in terms of we want to divide up the repos into these three categories, and these are the reasons. But there are a lot of implementation details to work out, like the SIG contributor experience folks have provided feedback saying, hey, we don't know how much tooling this is going to require, or if it's actually easier to put more repos into an org and build tooling for that, as opposed to having 30 orgs. So I would just like to decouple sort of the goals and the directional aspect of we're going to have these three kinds of repos and have some sort of interim process to unblock SIGs and defer some of the details.
How about we, what do you say to if I strike all of the rules, or maybe all of the rules except for the ones around code of conduct and CLA bot?
Well, Well, I think even things like, are we going to org per SIG? I think that still seems to be open. And CNCF said, yeah, we can run the CLA bots, but there are details to work out. So I was just thinking,
So I would just say that. So I would just say there's three kinds of repositories. There's associated repositories. There's SIG sponsored repositories, and there's core repositories. And I'll strike all of the naming stuff and all of that. That's basically I'll strike anything that is vaguely controversial. And say we expect more consistency, TBD.
Yeah.
So is our goal to announce something to the community? Because I get asked this at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Yes, the goal is to have
my goal is to get this out to the community as quickly as possible and to start empowering SIGs to start creating repositories.
Yes.
Okay.
But if we haven't decided where they're going to create their repositories, it seems like we haven't empowered them.
Well, I'm okay. I mean, so maybe do we want to hash out the organization versus? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't actually care because you can always move them.
Yes, you can always move them.
If SIG decides to do mostly one org and lots of repos or one multi-org, we'll figure out which is better and we'll conform to that.
Can I make a suggestion that if we do something in the interim, like moving stuff out of the Kubernetes org is going to be incredibly fraught and painful for a lot of folks?
No, I'm not suggesting we change the status quo at all.
I mean, like, if we let somebody sort of say, hey, create a repo in Kubernetes now, and then like a month from now, we're like, oh, you need to move that repo out into some sort of SIG specific thing.
I don't think we should allow SIGs to create repos under the Kubernetes org. I don't think we should allow any things to be created that aren't coming through SIG architecture in the Kubernetes org.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we just use Incubator for all the SIG repos for now.
Sure, I don't care. I think the only issue with Incubator was that we had this implicit assumption that things were going to move forward, but if we sort of explicitly say like, hey, this is a temporary holding place, nothing's moving into Kubernetes from here, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Should we create another org, which is like, Kubernetes purgatory or something?
I mean, I would prefer to just say, let the SIGs figure out what they want to do. And
okay, so hang on. Hi, I'm the owner of a project that's lived in Kubernetes Incubator for over 12 months. I have met all of the graduation criteria. What does this proposal do for me?
There's a fact at the bottom that says exactly what the answer is.
It says it does nothing to me. That's going to be frustrating to me if I've been waiting for a long time with the suggestion that this is going to answer graduation.
Yeah, well, no, it is answering graduation. Graduation ain't happening, right? I mean, there's the second item says, my project wants to graduate from Incubator. How can I do it? And there's an answer exactly to that.
Okay, so.
Well, I think the answer is SIG architecture now is making it call by call, and there is no guaranteed graduation.
Or SIG, like SIG architecture or a SIG. You either graduate to a SIG repository or you graduate to a core repository, and you either get a SIG to sponsor you or you get SIG architecture to sponsor you into core.
Okay, so in the today interim world, if I go to SIG architecture and my project gets denied to go into Kubernetes, I'm still stuck back in Kubernetes Incubator.
No, you can go to a SIG and get a SIG to sponsor it, or you can move it outside.
No, today we're saying we don't know where SIGs can create their repos, so we're just going to allow SIGs to create repos in Kubernetes Incubator.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm okay with it, but I would prefer to just say SIGs create repos wherever they want to create repos.
I'd prefer not to do Incubator if possible because of the applied connotations that exist from legacy. Like I
agree with that. I mean, that's my motivation as well.
Okay.
And I don't really want to say purgatory because I would rather just say like, hey, SIGs, go figure it out. Or honestly, I prefer one org per SIG, but that seemed to spark up some.
Well, if we tell SIGs like put it wherever, then we like figuring out the mechanics around the CLA bot and stuff like that is going to be a pain.
No, it's not true actually, right? I mean, as I said, like the way that you do this with the CLA bot, the way that honestly the way that the Microsoft CLA bot works is that the bot is added as an owner, and the bot can find all projects that it's an owner of from the GitHub API, and then those are the ones it goes and scans.
But is this how the CLA bot works? So go ahead.
As a concrete place to put this, could we create a Kubernetes-SIGs organization that follows these rules? And then if we have to move it out of there, we can. Because, I mean, we can get the bot on one more org. That's not the problem. It's the fan out of orgs that's the problem. If we create Kubernetes SIGs and the only way you get in there is if the SIG owns you, we don't necessarily have to solve the org problem in the short term.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay, so instead of purgatory, we call it Kubernetes SIGs as the org.
Yes.
I'm sorry, purgatory was...
You're really stuck on that purgatory name, aren't you, Joe?
No. I'm fine. That sounds good. Good plan. Let's do it.
Okay. I will cut this down, create a new doc, and share it with everybody with the goal of having it on Kubernetes Dev by the end of the week.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the process here, though. So, like, as a SIG lead, who's also a steering committee member, that wants to get a new repo for a SIG node use case to do node auto repair, should I anticipate at the outcome of this that we will have a Kubernetes SIGs organization, my new repo will go there, I go to SIG architecture to get agreement on the use case and repo, and that's the process?
No, you go to SIG node.
Okay.
You go to SIG node to get approval to create it in the Kubernetes SIGs org, and as long as SIG node is willing to approve it, then it can go in.
Okay. And then when do I choose to go to SIG architecture?
If you want it to go into Kubernetes core, or you want your product to go GA.
Okay, so that's the part I don't still get clarity on. So I want to go and create a repo that has code.
Yeah, but I'm going to strike that part. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm going to strike that part about the GA part, like, because that was clearly controversial. Let's strike that. We'll solve it later.
Am I allowed to publish images to a container registry for my code?
Yes.
Does it go to the same registry that holds cube images?
Don't care.
We may care. We don't have an opinion yet. Baby steps.
Okay.
Sounds like a SIG release decision.
Yeah, yes. I'm more than happy to guinea pig the process. Like, I've been holding back trying to, like, get a repo to hopefully experiment with Brendan's diagram or methodology first. So, like, I'm happy to be the first victim, I guess.
Yeah, and I think let's split off the GA discussion, because I sort of agree that it's orthogonal, and say, like, that's a different discussion about what it means to be GA. And we'll decide whether we think there's a community-wide standard for GA or not, and we'll just apply that separately.
So one more caveat, we should probably we need to pick an owner for who legislates naming disputes or naming concerns in Kubernetes SIGs, and that might as well be SIG architecture, unless we have a reason not to.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
And I think also, if there were like a top-level owners file or something in every single one of these new repos that specified the SIG that owns them, that would be good too. Just so that we don't lose track. Let's not regress.
Or a naming convention too. A naming convention could be like, Kubernetes SIGs node dash whatever. SIG name dash project.
And the SIG accepts lazy consensus, or what is that?
Well, we have the usual problem that there are no decision-making processes in SIGs, and they don't have defined members and things like that. So,
lazy consensus it is.
Lazy consensus it is.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. We have a couple of the things I think we would like to get to. Brian, did we adequately address your resurrecting the interim SIG repo agreement thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. I'm afraid I have to drop off because I need to get to another meeting. So sorry, folks. I'll take care of cutting that thing down and sending it out tonight. Or maybe tomorrow. Actually, given my schedule tomorrow.
Okay. Joe, you had something on here about getting an answer to George and Paris about what we'd like to see out of the contributor summit. I'm under the impression they're just going to do what they told us they were going to do, because we ran out of time to give them a decision.
So I have an inside bit of information there in that they knew we were going to do this, so they padded a bit of time. So if we have any opinions, right now is the moment to say them, because otherwise they will do what they said they were going to do, because we've run out of time.
So I personally don't have any strong opinions, as long as we're planning this with enough time that folks can actually sort of know what's happening and attend. I think that, if George and Paris have some good ideas that they want to try out, they should go and try those ideas out. I also think we need to be careful about who we invite and make sure that that's fair, because that seemed like we kind of backed into it last time. But there may not be capacity issues at KubeCon-EU, so maybe that's kind of moot now.
Everyone who has expressed interest to every one of these contributor summits has actually been invited. So I think their concern, and the reason they reached out to us, is that this committee has a tendency to, shall we say, show up with negative opinions after the fact, as opposed to positive, hey, I'd like to see this outcome. So I think if we are letting them go and do what they think they need to do based on the feedback from last time, and that they've got this new plan, that we need to be supportive of it. And then if we have challenges and changes we want from it, suggest them ahead of time as opposed to criticizing what comes out.
So I think the best thing we can do to empower them is give them a clear yes early, which if your back channel can, if your secret back channel can help with that, Sarah, go for it. Otherwise,
I will tell them that we are empowering them to do the things they think that they want to change based on the feedback, and we will go forward from there.
Okay.
The steering committee officially nominates for George and Paris to own this.
Mm-hmm. I think they do. So yeah, we can just say delegated happily, do your thing.
Yep. Yeah, I saw Brian steal that Kubernetes SIG's username before I could get to it. For what it's worth, I think this is something they're doing under the guise of community management, and it's something I think should be a sub-project of the contributor experience SIG. So,
and that is exactly where they're doing it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, Sarah, you're next up with project graduation at CNCF.
So Dan Cohn has asked, and not Dan, actually this time it was Chris Anichik has asked, he really, really, really wants us to decide that we want to graduate. We've met all the criteria. He doesn't want to graduate anyone else first. He wants us to graduate first and or as a group together with a couple of projects. So are we okay being graduated?
Brian expressed some concerns last time about that it might limit our options in some respects, but I don't think we got any further than that.
Yeah, I don't think that's relevant anymore. And the other concerns I had were, and it's, as the first project to graduate, it's going to set a precedent. So just for CNCF side, we want to make sure that, we do actually meet the implicit expectations. However, the size of the project makes it really challenging. So I think, it's not going to be better than it is. I mean, we do have a steering committee that was elected. We are moving forward, if not as fast as everyone would like on some of the governance issues. We do define, have a definition of member of standing. We have a defined contributor ladder. So yeah, I mean, we meet the basic criteria, and amusingly, some other projects are mirroring some of the things that we do verbatim. Some of the things have been copied into like Fluent e-governance docs and things like that. So we are setting a precedent whether we want to or not.
Little do they know we're making it up as we go along.
Yeah, and one thing I'm pushing in CNCF as well is to make some marketing changes. So the graduated projects, the incubating projects, and especially the inception projects will be differentiated marketing-wise, and it would be really weird for the biggest first flagship project to not be graduated when, practically speaking, most of the marketing does go into Kubernetes today.
Is there any concrete downside to graduating that we should be aware of?
No, there's not really. Like, the governance is intended to be very light touch, and the requirements really have been crafted around Kubernetes and the expectations about how it should operate. I mean, even I would say it's maybe even gone overboard, where some services and help and contact that have been offered to some of the smaller projects we weren't even aware of, because they just assumed that we didn't want to be bothered by that. So I think there's no downside for us, and it would be good for CNCF and for the other projects to move forward with this. And that's my current feeling. My previous concerns have been addressed or are no longer relevant.
Cool. I agree.
And by the way, I do plan to run again for the TOC in March. So, there will still be someone familiar with Kubernetes on the TOC if I get reelected.
Do you self-flagellate, Brian?
Yeah, I know.
Regularly. Okay, so do we need to make a formal vote, or should we just vote for anybody who's concerned about this? Do we have quorum? We have quorum because only Brendan's missing, right?
So there is actually.
I think we should do it. Okay.
Oh, there is a draft graduation statement or something, which we should probably be the ones submitting that.
Okay.
As opposed to CNCF asking us to do it, just as a process.
Do we want to put this on like the steering committee mailing list and go through like a round of like, here's the draft, here's the implications, is everybody in favor, and then have us maybe do it that way or do it as a PR? Like, I don't know, is this an email thing or a PR thing?
Well, so Derek drafted the decision-making thing, right? So what did that say? I did read it, but I don't remember it saying where the vote should happen.
I assume the vote happened in this meeting, to be honest. Maybe we should have been more explicit on that.
Yeah, what the TOC...
I'd like to have
the vote itself could have been recorded on the PR.
Yeah, what the TOC does is they actually do it through email, and that has multiple benefits. One is that it can be answered asynchronously. Not everybody can necessarily attend the call or whatever, and it has a permanent record that is less easily changed. Like GitHub permissions are such that people can go back and edit things pretty easily, and notifications.
Do we want to add that to the charter, like votes that must be recorded, or votes that we feel have recorded should be done on the steering committee mailing list and distributed widely?
Yeah, so I think the process was you post a PR, then you post an announcement of your PR to the steering committee mailing list. I can go and amend it and say the outcome of the vote itself will be recorded on the steering committee mailing list, and I'll do that before in a week.
Okay. My only other concern about that policy was the 4 weeks. That for December is not quite long enough.
I chose 4 weeks because I thought it was for you. So what is the appropriate length?
So it could either be 5 weeks, or we could say, like, except December 15th through January 7th or something like that. I mean, 5 weeks would be a full fix.
Okay. I'd say that I think that falls in the spirit, so hopefully we don't have to amendments to the amendment process. I think this falls under the small tweak category, and hopefully there's no disagreement on that. So if you just want to...
This year I only took 3 weeks, but the last year I took 4 weeks. So
okay.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, and we also don't have a proposed sprint for next month, which I completely forgot at the beginning of this. So I'm going to carry over everything that we're working on that isn't closed to assume that's part of our current sprint and put out a pull request to update the backlog file. And we can banter about whether or not we've captured the appropriate scope of sprint-based work for February. Sarah and Phil, I apologize we didn't have time to get to your items. Reminder that we should provide feedback to Paris running the mentor program. You're a SIG lead, doubly so. And Phil, should we have a weekly update at the community meeting? Like, I think we should have an update at the same cadence that we have this meeting, certainly, because this seems to be something to talk about. So
yep.
I plan on starting it off tomorrow, and if there are other things you want to talk about, feel free to edit the community meeting notes. Okay,
Sadly, I
Wednesday. All right, I think that's everything. Thanks, everybody. Happy Wednesday, all.
Bye.
Bye.